I'm going to share with you the top 8 states when it comes to taxes for retirees in this episode. Done a lot of soul searching, done a lot of reviews, looked at my old episodes of the state by state taxation for retirees, and these are my top 8, which I'll share with you here right now. So let's dive right into it. But first, welcome again to the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel, my friends. You'll see that little red button down there. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. Then hit the notification bell. There's a little bell right, I think it's right next to it, that you'll be notified of future content. I do about 5 or so, maybe even more videos a week. You want to be kept up to date. Like I just did one on Vanguard. They're calling for only 1 to 3% real rate of return on stocks for the next decade. You got to be up to snuff. And so this is the place for that. So let's dive right into it. The top 8 states for retirees in the U.S. And we start with Alaska. Now, let me just share with you real quick. There's 3 basic issues here. We got income tax, we got sales tax, and we got property tax. The worst of the 3 is property because there's really nothing you can do, especially if they don't have a homestead exemption or something like that. So property tax, if you're going to own a home or live someplace, there is a property that someone's paying it. And if you're renting it, you're still paying it to the homeowner, just you're doing it through a rent. If you own it, you're paying it because you have to pay the county or else they're going to put a lien on your home and eventually put you out. And so property tax is the big one because not much you can do there to manipulate that. Now, one of the nice things about property tax actually is that a lot of these states have homestead exemptions, which can reduce a lot of your property tax, give you more of an exemption against the assessed value. Biggest drawback actually is at the end of the day, they're going to get their tax one way or the other. And if they need to raise taxes and you scream bloody murder, they're still going to get their taxes. So there's not much you can do with property tax other than vote, run for office, use your exemption, or just hope that the good folks in your county, because typically there's a done by the county, don't kill you from a property tax perspective. All right. So when it comes to property tax, not much you can do. Now, secondly, I do want to point out it is a county thing. You got to look at each individual county as opposed to just a state. And I'll show, like here's Alaska, for instance. Their overall property tax is 1.02. But remember, what does the county look at as well? So you just got to keep that in mind. What's the county doing? So some counties are actually quite low. I looked at like in Virginia, I lived in Rockingham County. That's only 0.55. But if you go up to like Fairfax County is above 1. And so the state as a whole has an average of like 0.87 or something like that, which is quite low. But when you take out Fairfax and you go to Augusta County, Rockingham County, which is the western part of VA, your property tax is actually quite low. So just don't look at the property tax and say, oh, it's high or low. You got to dive into that in terms of the county specifically. Number 2 is sales tax. Sales tax you can do some manipulation with. If you grow some of your own food, you don't pay sales tax. A lot of states like in Georgia, they don't tax groceries, so you can buy groceries in Georgia. If you want to go buy a car, maybe you go to South Carolina, which has a lower sales tax, something like that. So sales tax is number 2. You can manipulate that burden to some degree. And a lot of states for retirees don't tax prescription drugs and they don't tax groceries, generally speaking. Again, sales tax, you got to look beyond, and Alaska doesn't have one, but you got to look beyond this right here, the state sales tax, because here is the average local sales tax in Alaska. Just use that for an example. So it's not just a state, it's a state and locality. So you got to look at, ideally identify the county you want to live in. Fulton County, Georgia. What's the local property tax? What's the sales tax? But sales tax can be manipulated to some degree, certainly more so than property tax. And lastly is individual tax. So going back to Alaska, they don't have an individual income tax, which is great. But individual income tax can be manipulated. It really can. And so if you manipulate correctly at the right time, i.e. typically when your income is the lowest, you might pay a little bit more today to avoid a huge amount of tax in the future. And so that this is the three-headed monster, this is my one that concerns me the least, frankly, generally speaking, simply because it can be manipulated with doing various tax planning efforts that you should do, which a lot of people don't. And so a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't have a state income tax, i.e. Texas. That must be a good place to live. But Texas is not on my list of top 8. It's just not, because they have high property tax and relatively high sales tax, even though they have no income tax. And frankly, Tennessee slid in there, even they don't have an income tax, simply because their property taxes are pretty low. But at the end of the day, you'll notice New Hampshire is not on here, even though they don't have a sales or an income tax. And the reason being because the property tax is quite large. All right, so let's just dive right into it. Alaska comes in. These aren't in any specific order, just in alphabetical order. So I'm not saying Alaska is the best. Alaska has no income tax. So it doesn't matter what your Social Security is. It doesn't matter what your retirement pensions are. You pay no income tax in the state of Alaska. So that's pretty good. Now, it does have no sales tax as a state. Local sales tax is 1.76 though. Okay. So on average, again, you got to look at your specific county, but local sales tax is 1.76. But essentially we're saying zero to little sales tax. That's not too bad. And of course, in this case, the gas tax is quite favorable at 12.3%, which is the lowest in the union. Property tax is a little bit higher in Alaska. The nice thing about property tax is you can deduct it. All right, that is a deductible expense, but most likely you're not going to be above your standard deduction in retirement. So most likely the deduction you get on property tax in Alaska will be minimal at the end, if any, simply because the standard deductions nowadays are so high. The drawback about Alaska is even while they're 1.02% on average, is pretty much in the middle of the union, because the property in Alaska is pretty high. The actual dollars that you spend is pretty high in Alaska. And I don't know if they give you much of a homestead exemption. Yeah, so basically this is what you're paying right there, simply because that's the only method that they have for taxation. So Alaska comes in well. The number one, too, is Delaware, believe it or not. That's the only state in the Northeast. Yep. Delaware comes in as not number two. Number 2 of 8, but that doesn't mean it's the second best. Delaware comes in very high, and the reason for that, just look at my notes, no sales tax in the great state of Delaware. So we start here, look at sales tax, none whatsoever. And there's none in the localities either. No sales tax, no from the state or locals. Gas tax is moderately low, so that's good. Individual taxes, look at this. While that looks like it's high, they give you huge deductions on retirement income. Again, just look at my notes here. Huge deductions. And even when you do pay taxes, the income tax that you pay is actually quite low. Social Security isn't taxed, just gigantic deductions on income. So you're likely, if your income is probably less than $100,000, you're just not going to pay much in income tax at all. And then the property tax is incredibly low. Look at that. So the one state in the Northeast, which jumps out at me in terms of favorability for retirees, without question, is Delaware. Now, again, New Hampshire is up there too, but the property taxes are just through the roof without much of a homestead exemption. So I just could not put it on my top 8. Delaware is pretty close to being my best for sure. I haven't really thought of it best yet, but Delaware would be up there without question. Just look at that. Wonderfully low property tax, very low sale, doesn't have a state sales tax or local income sales tax, and income tax, while it looks high, lots of deductions there for the state of Delaware. They don't tax Social Security either. You just can't beat it. So Delaware comes in there easily in the top 5, but certainly in the top 8. All right, so next one is going to be my own state of Georgia. And Georgia might be a little bit confusing to some folks, but let me show you. Georgia, we give no income tax on the first $130,000 if you're married filing jointly in the state of Georgia. You get to write off $65,000 per head. So per tax filing person, if you have a tax return, you and your spouse, you get to write off $130,000, which means this right here is non-existent. There's no income tax in Georgia if you're less than $130,000 of income. We do have a sales tax, but we don't tax groceries. All right, so that's pretty good. And while our state sales tax is 4%, you really got to look at the county. Like my county in Fulton, it comes in at 3.75. And so even while the average in Georgia is 7.15, where I live is in 3.75, you go to some other counties that was like 1.5 to 2%. So we're looking at 6% all in. And again, no sales tax on groceries, which is a big portion of your overall sales tax would be groceries for sure. And then property taxes are pretty low as well, clocking at less than 0.1%. And we get pretty significant homestead exemptions here in Georgia too. So basically no income tax unless your income's above a certain threshold. No sales tax on groceries and pretty low property tax. Georgia comes in even better than Florida for sure. The property is just cheap here, and the homeowners insurance is just cheaper here than in Georgia and then in Florida. So when you factor all that in, one of the best places to live for retirees is Georgia without question. Now, am I biased? Sure, I live in Georgia. I mean, my goodness. And I know a little bit more about it. It's kind of between Georgia and Virginia, actually. and New Hampshire is thrown in there as well. I couldn't put Virginia on there just because it's really specific to your county what the sales tax is going to be. Property tax is going to be, and I could not go county by county because the overall Commonwealth of Virginia had a little bit higher in the income tax, a little bit lower on the property tax, a little bit higher on the sales tax. I had to go with Georgia simply because you get $130,000 of income tax free, which is good. All right, number 4 is going to be surprise. You ready for this? Hawaii. What? I'm telling you, I was stunned, but what? This is amazing. Hawaii, the lowest property tax in the union. The lowest property tax in the union. Look at this. Now, let me take a break. I don't just look at Tax Foundation. I look at a bunch of different websites too, smartasset.com, Kiblinger's, of course. I started looking at some more local property tax and income tax and sales tax stuff as well. But I do like Tax Foundation. I think these are the best in terms of just giving us a brief. So when you do the conglomerate, this is what I came up with, looking at all these different sources. I'm just using Tax Foundation to kind of help me go along with this guide here. But look at that. The lowest property tax in the nation, and they give you significant homestead exemptions as well. So people say, yeah, but the prices are so high in Hawaii, the cost of living, you're going to pay a lot of money in taxes, even if the rate's so low. That is true, except that Hawaii has huge homestead exemptions that that will reduce the actual dollar amount you pay in property tax. So the lowest property tax in the union, big exemptions are going to reduce the dollars you pay in property tax in Hawaii. You can't beat it. Sales tax among the lowest in the union, look at 4.35, and again up to 3. Property sales and income tax. If you can get a low sales and low property tax, the rest will take care of itself for sure. Now, the individual tax are a little bit high. Again, you got to be careful just looking at 10.2. They don't tax Social Security, and they don't tax your pension. Now, if you have 401k or IRA distributions, they're going to tax that. But Social Security is not taxed. So let's just say you have bulk of your income is from Social Security and a 401k, and the bulk of that Social Security, you're going to have minimal taxes. If the bulk of your income is Social Security, pension, and a little bit of an income from IRA or 401k, you're just not going to pay that much. So at the end of the day, if you have Social Security, Roth IRA, and a pension, you pay no tax. So there's a lot of different things you can do for Hawaii to minimize the income tax. And on top of that, with incredibly low sales tax and then just incredibly low income or property tax, Hawaii's tough to beat. The only drawback is that you're going to have some serious cost of living expenses. There's just no getting around that. But at least the taxes won't be a huge burden to you in that regard. I was stunned by Hawaii. All right, let's keep going. Number 5 is Kentucky. And again, there's no specific order, just alphabetical. So Kentucky is real good for top. And we're going to scroll down here to Kentucky. And let's see what we got in my notes. Oh, yeah. So Kentucky I like quite a bit. So let's hit the sales tax, the bottom 10 in terms of sales tax. Even look at that. Looks like the state sales tax is in the top 20, but because there's no other locality sales tax, they're actually in the bottom 10 in sales tax. They don't tax groceries. That's right. So they don't tax groceries as well. The biggest one you're going to pay is groceries. So the fact that you're not paying grocery tax and it's only 6% across the board puts them in one of the lowest categories in the union. And watch this property tax. And again, property taxes in terms of actual dollar amount, because the income or the property values are so low, is less than $1,000. Now, again, if you look at various counties, like Alabama jumps out at me, Kentucky jumps out at me. Some counties in Alabama, some counties in Kentucky are much, much higher, like in Louisville, whatever county that is in Kentucky, tax you quite a bit more than some of the ones in Appalachia. But at the end of the day, on average, 0.8% puts them in the bottom third. Yeah, roughly about the bottom third. But their actual dollars that you're paying in property taxes is less than $1,000. And then we got our state tax. They don't tax any Social Security, and they give you huge deductions on income. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was, like $41,000 or something like that of retirement income deduction. So essentially, there's no income tax. Let's see. Yeah, I can't remember, but it's a huge amount. It's up to the $40,000. I can't remember if that's per household or per person. But either way, if you have $100,000, of which $50,000 Social Security and $50,000 is coming from your IRA, 401k, pension income, your income tax is minimal to zero. for sure. And I forgot to say, they do give you a homestead exemption as well in Kentucky as well. And no taxes on groceries. So homestead exemption on Kentucky property, low property tax to begin with, huge deductions on IRA distributions, no tax on that on taxation on Social Security, groceries being exempt from sales tax. Kentucky is just fantastic. All right, so number 6 is going to be Mississippi. I was actually surprised to see this because I thought Mississippi would be just because they're poor, and actually it's funny too. West Virginia's poor, Maine are poor too, and yet Maine, West Virginia, Mississippi are all relatively low states on taxes, believe it or not. A lot of people don't believe that, but if you're making a lot of money, they are high tax. But if you're making average income to lower, tax rates are fine. So Mississippi exempts all income from retirement income. So they exempt IRAs, 401ks, pensions, Social Security, everything is exempt from income tax, which is pretty doggone fantastic. So if that's what you're living on, Social Security, IRA, 401k, and pension, you pay no tax. Sales tax is high, but again, that looks number 2. Oh my goodness! But if you factor in the actual overall state sales tax, it's still pretty low. I mean, it's not low, but it's in top 20 or so, but not significant for sure. It's moderate, and off the top of my head, I can't remember if they tax. Yeah, I can't remember if they tax groceries or not. But at the end of the day, for no income tax, essentially, and then watch this property tax. Again, you're talking, and here you get huge exemptions too, from homestead exemption. Excuse me, you get huge homestead exemption as well in the state of Mississippi. So essentially, almost nothing, in $400 or $500 in property tax. Maybe $1,000. Basically, no income tax, and a moderately high sales tax. Can't beat that, my friends. Can't beat that. I can't remember if they tax groceries there or not, but of the 3 things, property tax is low, income tax is 0. Yeah, you're paying a little bit of sales tax. I'll take it. Then we got Tennessee comes in next at number 7, and this was a struggle. Like I said, Tennessee, New Hampshire, it was pretty favorable too, but Tennessee came in simply because 2 of the big 3 is no income tax and very low property tax. South Carolina, another one, low property tax, but Tennessee had to come in 2 of the 3. Now, they do get you on capital gains and stuff, but at the end of the day, if everything that you have has come from IRAs, 401ks, and Social Security, there won't be any income tax, which is just fantastic. Sales tax is high. All right, sales tax in Tennessee, they have the biggest, I think the second highest sales tax. Yeah, right there, second highest sales tax in the union. But they do exempt groceries. And again, groceries are I have a family of 6. We're at the grocery store every day, it seems like. So we're spending a boatload of money on groceries from a sales tax perspective. In Tennessee, if you can avoid spending taxes on groceries, you're in a good place for sure. Let's see, homestead, so then property tax. Property tax is way low. I mean, 0.75, and they do have homestead exemptions as well. You just, again, in terms of total dollars that you pay, it's going to be minimal relative to all the other benefits that you have with no income tax and pretty high sales tax, but again, not groceries, and very low property tax. Again, you can't beat it. And then, of course, the 4 seasons. I mean, the weather is fantastic. I didn't include the weather in the overall scheme of things, but if you factor in, like Alaska, it's cold up there, so you got to take that into consideration. Tennessee is definitely in my top 8 for sure. Yeah, right there on the border, but they came in because of homestead exemption, because they don't tax groceries, and because of no state income tax. So can't go wrong there. And my last one is probably the number 1, and that's Wyoming. And let me show you, Wyoming is just sickening how favorable it is for taxation. Watch this. Wyoming, the drawback by Wyoming, if you don't like wind, you're probably in the wrong place. No individual income tax. Look at that. No individual income tax. Where did I do my notes here? Okay. So, I mean, you can't beat that. There's no income tax. All right. Property tax, amongst the lowest in the union. Property tax, 0.55%. Now, they do, look at this. Look at the variance here. So the lowest in the union property tax, but the highest actual collection per capita. If you want to take a guesstimate why that is, well, it's because, there's not that many residents in Wyoming. I think it's like 500,000 people. And some of the people do live there, like Dick Cheney and those guys live in those fancy places in the Teton Mountains or whatever it's called, and up there in where they always Jackson Hole. So they have these huge houses that are probably taxed $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. But for you, just regular middle class Joe, you're paying 0.55% property tax. Yeah, you just can't beat that. And then sales tax, watch this, low basically in the bottom five of the U.S. So Wyoming, huge for no taxes on income, very low income or property tax, and on top of that, very low sales tax as well. I can't remember if Wyoming had I didn't write it down. Shoot, I can't remember if they had a homestead exemption or not. I wonder if it'll tell us here. Property tax, it doesn't say. But there you go. That's my top 8. So again, let me reiterate them. So if you're looking at Wyoming, double check to see if they have a homestead exemption, because I just off the top of my head, I can't remember. But we got Alaska, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Wyoming. That's your top 8 for best places from a tax perspective for retirees to live in. If you got comments, disagreements, I'd love to hear them right there. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is 2018. Come back to me next year when we got elections at the end of this year. That could change things. Who knows? But just to back your mind, remember, there are states that are moving the ball forward. New Jersey's done some great work. Rhode Island's done some great work in terms of making them much more favorable. Like I said, Maine's done some great work. So there's a lot of good things going on. But right now, these are my favorite. And you'll notice, lastly, they're not all income tax free states. All right. And a lot of people fall for that. Say, oh, Tennessee or Texas, I should say, New Hampshire, they don't have a state income tax. That means it must be a good place to live. Yeah, absolutely. They're wonderful places to live. But when it comes to the overall tax burden, when you factor in the property tax, New Hampshire is through the roof. It's through the roof, and there's just not much of an exemption. So just got to keep that in mind. So these are my big 8. I hope you like this. If you like what you see here, just go ahead and subscribe down below. Like I said, thumbs up. I'm always open for comments. Put the comments down below, and we'll see you next time on the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.